to our discussion. We decided that we were going to talk about environmental justice today, and we've asked Justice Horn to join us. And Justice, you can make introductory remarks if you'd like, or
Mhm.
if you want to chime in, you can chime in. We'll probably just have a pretty open discussion. Nathan, I'm hoping that you'll talk a little bit about the website. I've read the information you provided about the link to the Justice website. So I'm hoping you'll chime in with some of that. And I'm expecting that the rest of you have lots to add. So I'm going to mute. Justice, do you want to say a few words? Would you like to know who's a commissioner and who's not? Just
No, I see everyone on equal playing field here.
okay, very good. Perfect. Well, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to let you
Mhm.
um, have a few words and then we'll open the discussion.
All right. Thank you very much, Carol. So, thank you for the introduction. My name is Justice Horn, a community organizer here in Kansas City, and recently have been leading a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and a lot of the policy change and police reform we've seen in the community. Before my time, I was a student body president at UMKC. Still, I have one more semester there, and was taught by Professor Davies here. That is kind of there's a champion of sustainability at UMKC. She'll be humble about it, but yeah, I work with her through the sustainability committee and getting that back. But primarily, what I wanted to talk about is climate justice and how we move when the system has changed and making sure that all communities of color have a seat at the table and that we're not leaving anyone behind. I am well aware that for us to get to our goals, that it not only needs to be the city behind this, but also the second largest carbon emitter, which is the University of Missouri Kansas City. So we need everyone at the table if we want to get to a lower carbon output for the Kansas City overall. So kind of currently, I wanted to talk about how the public and even the Black and brown community view sustainability here in Kansas City. A lot of them do believe in it, especially the younger generation, the system change and how we do business. I've talked to a lot of pastors and people in the community about this meeting throughout this week. And one thing they are worried about is through various times in our country, we've transitioned or had some form of revolution, or that could be through the civil rights era, the industrial revolution, and many examples like that. But what worries them is making sure that when we do transition, this system is just for everyone, and that is not just benefiting one select group or one select community. I think that when we transition, it is an opportunity to equalize the playing field for everyone because it is something new and it should be something that lifts all communities of color up. And then also, on the other hand, if things continue to get worse in our country and for our planet, it will be low income and communities of color that will suffer first. I think we all can agree on that here. And we even see it here with COVID, that it is poorer communities and communities of color that are being hit the hardest. So making sure that we are all on the same team and that we're transitioning together and making sure that every person has a seat at the table. So I want to open it up. I do have two more points, but if anyone has any, I didn't want to lecture anyone because I probably have the least experience here, but and know that even on the community, a lot of people have respect for this commission, and I'll speak for the whole movement. A lot of those that are leaving the protests, that we are very thankful for the unanimous motion to write a letter to City Council stating your all support for the Black Lives Matter movement. We really did appreciate that.
Um, can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Justice, on behalf of the EMC, we wanted to thank you again for coming to speak with us about this. One question that I had is, um, beyond the efforts around police reform, I know that there is a broader movement to try to bring more awareness to issues of structural or individual racism within various movements. And obviously that extends to environmentalism and sustainability. Um, Beyond some of the issues that you kind of touched on earlier, I'm curious if you wanted to provide any insights that you have or you've seen in terms of how the local sustainability movement may be falling short in supporting the voices and input of Black and Brown communities and individuals like yourself.
Yeah, so I think, and thank you for that question. I think it's absolutely important. I think absolutely, and if you guys can't tell that all of this whole conversation, this movement got started after the murder of George Floyd, and primarily it has been a conversation of police reform and policy change. But in recent years, and I think it will be shown in history that Kansas City made sure that every form of racism was on the table. We saw that with the dropping of charges, the renaming of J.C. Nichols Fountain and Parkway. We're now seeing police reform. We're now seeing different disparities now being talked about, because I do agree, and I've been saying it for years and years, that Black Lives Matter, but our institutions do not say Black Lives Matter. That's housing disparity, disparities in education, transportation, internet access, economic mobility, food insecurity, and so on and so forth. I think, and this is something I stress, when we're talking about advancing transportation in Black and Brown areas, we just don't need to do it to do it. I think the standard has to be set higher, that when we talk about transportation, it needs to be economically sound and for the environment transportation. Or if we talk about new businesses in the area, we just shouldn't just throw up businesses. They need to have higher standards on how we do business. And this can be said throughout all of that we need to have a higher a higher standard with how we go about doing business to, address all these socioeconomic disparities in our community. I think where environmental groups have fallen short is seeing that all of these disparities and all of these problems are interconnected. They are all a part, they all work with each other, and they're all intertwined, because you look at, for example, on whichever side of truce you live, you have a different life expectancy. But then also with that, you may have a higher rate of blood pressure, diabetes, or when you look at the other side, housing and the median income for housing is lower. Then you also look at that, there's less access to food, then there's also less access to equitable education. It's going to take a lot of policy change, and it can't be just kind of a one policy fits all. We need to be very aware that this is a problem that is all over the community. And when we talk about more sustainable gains and policy change, it needs to be one that addresses a lot of these disparities. I think even on truce, we're seeing a lot of economic development, but with that, that's a good thing. But we also need to be well aware of gentrification in Kansas City. And that's when we also need to look at the county level if there was some form of rent ceiling that wouldn't allow for landlords to, push out communities of colors. It's just stuff like that. Although change is a good thing, I love that we are addressing this and making policy change. We need to plan ahead for kind of the worst case scenario, and then not making sure that it's becomes a problem later. It's the same with, for example, us getting body cams for the KCPD. Now is a time to have policies around body cams before it then creates a problem, and then we have to address it. That could be said about any of this. We need to address it while we're still talking about it. But that's what I feel is just where we've fallen short. Sorry if I talk a lot too. Where we've fallen short is seeing that all of this is interconnected. And that's a part of a community. That's all these policies, all these problems are connected in some way or some form. So thinking big picture, it's not, I know we have groups, love them to death, where it's Sunrise Movement and they just kind of fall in environmental groups, or we have the KC tenants, they're just in housing. And I wish that everyone would work together and see that all of our policies are connected, and it's a part of a bigger system. It's thinking big picture, how we can all work together. And it's like, For example, if we have housing reform, then we need to make sure that that housing is sustainable housing reform, that it's good housing that betters the environment and betters communities of color as well. And that then talks about civil rights and making sure that, so it's all connected.
Justice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Jerry Schechter. I'm in the Office of Environmental Quality. The comments that you're making about seeing that kind of interconnectedness are not new arguments by any means.
Mm-hmm.
I came up through Vietnam and civil rights movement, and everybody at that and then was talking about people's inability to get together and see bigger pictures and how one thing affected another. From your perspective now, how do we address that kind of issue specifically? How do we get people educated enough to understand that there's a real connection, and how do we get people to a point where they feel they can actually make an impact on those connections?
I think, and I appreciate your question. I think it's realizing that there's a greater problem out there, that a lot of these disparities can be solved with a lot of us working together. And that's even with the Black Lives Matter movement. It not only brought out people of color, communities of color, it brought out heterosexual people, it brought out the LGBTQ community, it brought out young, old, people that lived here in the city, that lived in the suburbs. I think there needs to be more of a unifying message that if one person's having this problem, it should be all of our problems, that there needs to be more of a community feel here in Kansas City. And I do appreciate and think that the movement has set that straight for everyone, because a lot of people are speaking up on disparities that do not at all affect their own lives. But I think I think allyship is absolutely important with that. And that could be said through racially, sexual identification or stuff like that. We just need more people to speak out and see more of a unifying message, in that anyone who's suffering in our community, that should be put on us too, the community, to better that. So I'd say more of just a collaborative and uniting environment and kind of nature for everyone.
So Justice, this is Ben Proffer, Commissioner, and I really agree with you. And I think that one of the things that I didn't think was necessarily a correction that we had to make in the minutes from the last meeting, but there's an ongoing kind of balance between mainstream environmentalists that see all of these as like unified problems that are interconnected, and then you get to a place where it's like, where do you start?
Mm-hmm.
In the first place? You're trying to create a situation in which you're making progress, and so much of the conversation with underserved and disenfranchised communities is in restoring rights that they didn't have previously, and restoring financial and community support that they never had in the first place. So in looking at the information that Nathan sent out through the Just Transition framework that we're going to talk about a little bit later, it talks about restoring Indigenous rights and land rights to people who have been disenfranchised through the founding of this country in the first place. And then I think that, do you have something specific in terms of economic reparations, or in terms of, a further conversation about like, how do we help to fix that situation, and how do we protect the conversation from being corrupted by forces that would like to co-opt it?
Yeah. So, and this took me a while. I even had to educate myself, and just for kind of background reasons, my kind of makeup. So my father's African American and Native American, and then my mom's white and Pacific Islander. So kind of from where I stand, I feel that we need, and this is, I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning. I think that we need to make sure that, I wasn't a big fan of reparations. I didn't see the need of it until I educated myself and really seeing how far we started as a community. We'll talk about the Black community, almost 400 years behind, and even, I mean, that could be stated in redlining here in Kansas City. I mean, home ownership and having a home is the quickest way to build financial wealth for family. And the fact that Black and brown communities got locked out of the American dream because they couldn't have that, that has set one community back. I mean, years and years and decades of families haven't been able to advance as much as their white counterparts. And that's why we see the different income as well. And that's just the Black community. We could talk about the indigenous community. We could talk about the Pacific Islander community, the LGBTQ community, and so on and so forth. I think we need to first make sure that we are adding policy and reparations that make it an equalizer right now. Why I said at the very beginning, white communities of color and those in the community are very worried about this is because they see that they are still fighting for their rights and they feel that, all right, we're going to advance ourselves anymore. Why they are worried is they're worried about being left behind again, where one group will advance even more and communities of color will not move at all. And then there's then a bigger divide. I think that's what they're worried about the most. And I think that's why there needs to be policy now that addresses that before we all move together. I think simply, I mean, we could move together and then address that later, but I think now in the current day, we need to make sure that everyone's on equal playing field. And that's, I mean, being well aware that different communities are going to need different things. It's not equality, it's more equity and making sure that different groups have different resources and need different resources. It's not at all that a one size fit all for communities of color.
Hey, Justice, I love what you said right there toward the tail end about like every community is going to need sort of their own approach and really should be the ones dictating their own sort of like best approach to how to achieve equity and along with, you know, massive institutional change and policy change. So like help us from your, you know, perspective as someone who's on the like looking at the Environmental Management Commission, like how can we help facilitate people, you know, giving voice to what's will be best to them. I mean, you look at the makeup of the committee, it's not hard to see that, or the commission, it's not hard to see that we're predominantly white, male. And I think that one thing, and you know, this is something that I've just had to learn and educate myself on, you know, kind of as what you've said. One thing I think that we've not been well sort of equipped to do is bring in people from the east side of Kansas City to tell us what's best from a policy perspective for us.
Yeah.
Or any indigenous people that are residing in Kansas City as well. Like we are the LGBTQ community, you name it. Like that's not who's coming to our meetings and giving us input. How can we be better on that front?
I think, and I'll start off. I think I'll say it first. I think I understand. I believe that representation matters. But what you all are doing is first realizing that there needs to be representation at the table. I think that's the biggest, because some people don't even think they think they're fine in their current state. So I think coming at it with an open heart and knowing that anyone could do better, because everyone, no matter what business or institution or city you are, we could always do better. I think not only realizing that, but then getting communities of color at the table. I think it's so important if we get people that are on the other side of truth or that are Black and brown or indigenous or LGBTQ, then they're then going to not only feel represented and see themselves in the commission, they're also going to go back to their network and say, hey, this is why this is important. This is why this policy change is going to benefit our own community. And this is how, and then vice versa. They're going to come with their problems from their community and say, hey, how do we address this as a commission? And I truly believe that things get done when everyone's at the table. I mean, we only know what we know. So that's why it's important to have everyone at the table. But I mean, starting here, it starts with conversations and having an open heart and an open mind that we could do better. And I do appreciate that from the commission, but I think getting more people of color and everyone in is important.
So, Justice, if I may ask, beyond you, obviously, you are someone who is very tuned in and very engaged with the subject. Um, I think part of what we would want to understand too is, are there additional groups? Like, I mean, yes, like obviously, reaching out to different parts of the city is helpful, but in from your perspective, do you think that there are particular groups that would be um, more open to not only having conversations with us, but potentially offering members from within their ranks to be part of our group as well?
I think absolutely. If we're talking civil rights side, I would say getting kind of the big four is the NAACP of Kansas City, and then the Urban League of Kansas City, and then more squared. So kind of what they fall in is, yes, civil rights, but they are more expansive. They're all, and for example, the NAACP is the advancement of colored people in America. I think not only what they could bring to the table is the experience of people of color to the committee, but then also what the commission could do is also show, hey, this policy is going, it needs, you need to be at the table because this policy is important to the communities of color. I think not only it could be a partnership in showing them, more importantly, that this is important to you all, because I know even the Urban League and the NAACP may not see. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, why are you talking to the the commission on this? And they kind of say, oh, that's out of our realm. We need to educate and tell people that this is in the realm. They need to be at the table and that this is absolutely important. So I would do that. And I mean, trying to get the Sunrise Movement on board, but this all stays here. I know it's being recorded, but a lot of my generation and God love them, the Sunrise Movement. I believe that we have to work with everyone and that progress comes in strides. I know that they kind of want everything now and they're not going to settle for anything less. And that is sometimes not the best kind of way to go about business, but understanding that, and I agree with them. And I understand how they operate like that because we are in a climate crisis, and to them, it's we can't wait, we can't have incremental change. So I do also sympathize with them, but making sure that we get a lot of the younger youth and those who are in that group at the table. There are some of them that do like seeing policy change, but a lot of them are Green New Deal, nothing else. And that's it. When we've seen a lot of good policy that's come out of not only this commission, but also the city, that is the closest thing to that, but it's like, I believe they give you an inch, you take a mile. It's you continue to change things, and that's how I feel. So those are kind of the groups I would work with.
I don't know how we can change when food, shelter, and clothing are dependent on a competitive system that's supposed to be modeled after Darwin or some interpretation of nature, when I believe it's closer to horse manure. I just think that there are how many billion people on Earth now, and this competitive crap. I'm sorry, I'm kind of plain spoken.
No, you're fine. I love it.
Okay, well, and I've been working on environmental issues for full time for about, I don't know, 45 years, something like that, and I don't see it changing. And I sit on the commission, and I'm so frustrated sometimes. They all know that I have to rant every so often because I can't stand it. And I know a couple of Black commission members that I suggested quit because they were frustrated with the incremental change.
Yeah, the bureaucracy's slow.
Right. Well, you see, but it's all based on who's better. Who's better? and we can label a group, and then they're worse, and then somebody else is better, and we can divide the people so that the people don't have the sense enough to dig deep enough to find the commonality and find out that we're just being divided by people. I mean, look at the companies that won't come to town until we pay them by not giving them taxes, you know, by not taking taxes away from them that they steal from our children. You know, that's theft, but it's institutionalized and it's made okay. Well, it's not really okay. It's criminal, and it's not called criminal. So how, you know, I like, you know, we've done some neat things on this commission, and I don't, but you know, Sunrise is going to come up, and if it doesn't come up now, it's going to come up in the streets, and you can see that. You can see the energy in the streets, and people are doing, they're you know, they're going wacko and making up conspiracy theories like they're popcorn. I mean, you know, it's just like, so here I am, frustrated. I rant, and I'm in a minute I'm going to shut up. This is something that Marty does, and so what? How do we get at the underlying cause, the greed that's feeding all this garbage?
Yeah.
It pits us one against another and works to undermine a group of people who probably go into service in law and order in order to help, and turn out being polluted by the racism that's laced in this stupid community, which was an economic decision long ago. I mean, it was economics that caused people to, oh, I can make money off of enslaving people, so now I'm great because I've made money. I mean, I think we've got to tackle the whole thing, and I know that we're just a small thing here, you know.
So
but somehow, okay, I think I can shut
yeah,
up.
no, absolutely. I agree with everything you said. I think that's why, and I'll start small scale first. When talking with the African American community here in Kansas City, we do have factions of a new guard, old guard, those who may be more religious, those who may not be, those who are open-minded and may not be open-minded to how we do business. But when we sat down with all of the community members from the different factions of our community and told them, hey, no matter where you stand on this, they want us to be divided on this issue. They want us to have infighting, and they want our community to be split. But we all need to realize that no matter who's heading this, who is in charge of this, that we all reap the benefits when we have policy change for the community. I think that same argument and statement could be transitioned to environmental change and changing the system. And this is why I think it's so important. When we make this an issue for every group, every stakeholder, and every community in the community, and when you build a coalition of different communities, different people, I mean, even those, no matter what position you hold or the money you have, if you have a strong coalition of people, they cannot ignore your demands, because not only are you guys standing united, it's now become everyone's issue. So I think that's why it's important to have representation at the table, because we need to educate people that this is an issue for everyone, but then also builds a stronger coalition to get things done. Why we've gotten a lot of policy changes that this isn't, they can't split us and say, oh, that's a Black issue, or oh, that's a Easter Truth issue. I mean, everything with the Black Lives Matter coalition is that they're seeing this from everyone, every community, Hispanic, Black, young, straight, gay, that everyone agrees that this is an issue and it's a change, and those in power cannot ignore that. So I think we need to have that same approach when it comes to environmental justice and climate justice as well.
So Justice Bob Berkebile, first of all, thanks for your leadership at UMKC and in our community and spending this time with us. I want to I want to ask you to go deeper in an area that you brought up earlier and Nathan spoke to a little bit. And that is what I would describe as a lack of alignment between the urgency of this moment with respect to Black Lives Matter and equity in general on one hand, and climate change and the lack of resilience that is pressing upon us every day.
Yeah.
And so two of us were in a 2-hour meeting just before this one started.
Mm-hmm.
And we had trouble dealing with it. So the conflict in that meeting was, this was the Climate Action KC group. And it was a brainstorming session. And I would say that some of our members were concerned, and I was among them, that we needed to include all of the community in the conversation before we finalize the policy. There were others, and I'm conflicted on this because I'm in that camp as well, but there are others who articulately mentioned that that takes time. And actually some people said, let's just slow this down to be sure that we have everyone in the conversation. And the other side of the room is saying, we can't afford to slow it down because it will then damage the entire community, and most especially those who are not yet in the conversation.
Yeah.
So with that as a background, what I'd like to ask of you is help us understand how we engage all the community of color and the disadvantaged section of the community in such a way that they can become participants and empowered to be in that dialogue and learn at the same time. There's this feeling that we were, and sometimes the commission is, forcing this climate issue or environmental issue on the community that has no interest in it because they have higher needs like food and health and justice and access and so on. So give us some insight in how we as the Environmental Management Commission or others should engage the community efficiently and be candid about the urgency, so we're all advocates for making transformational change.
Yeah, no, I that is a tough question because there does need to be urgency with this, but then at the same thing, we do need everyone at the table. I think more importantly, I think it depends on what you feel is kind of the right thing to do. I think we all agree. I know here that there is an urgency to this. I mean, we're in a crisis and probably have like 10 years if things keep going on this track. But then also with that is making sure that we not only see the urgency, but that we are well aware that a revolution and a system change needs to happen, but we need to be well aware of what's going to happen the day after the revolution, what's going to be the system in place, and what's going to be there afterwards. I understand that relationships with the Black and brown and disenfranchised communities are going to take time, but I think the kind of pressing matter is, I would feel more urgent. I think when we talk about what happens after that, we need to make sure that the transition is just. I think that is kind of the better and biggest opportunity for us to kind of actually set out the playing field. And with that, when we transition to a just system, we could, put some more benefits to a certain group or really get them up to par. I think when we transition, we want to make sure that everyone's on equal playing field. But I agree that relationships with disenfranchised community, the Black and brown community, are going to take time because I agree with you. They see the urgency in education, criminal justice reform, police reform, and stuff like that. I think what we can continue to do is, with us as individuals, even me, I don't represent the whole Black experience in Kansas City, using my privilege and my platform to maybe fight the battles that they don't have enough time and or energy to fight. I think that's the most important thing right now. So that's kind of my advice for that. I don't know if I gave you an answer, but that's a tough question because I agree, and I see the urgency with reforming the system to make sure that we don't have a climate crisis and that things truly become bad. Because, I mean, very, very off the record, no one's going to be talking about healthcare or criminal justice reform when we don't have a planet anymore. I mean, things are going to be pulled back to basic necessity, food, water, and housing. I mean, that's the worst case scenario I want for us. So, yeah.
Thank you. We may ask for more input over time, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say something. Hi, Justice. How are you?
Hey,
Thank
how are you
you for
doing?
coming. I really appreciate having you here. How do we get people to see this as the same thing? It is the same systems that created this, the inequality, that is also the system that's driving the climate. And I have to say, I'm with Marty. I'm in the urgent camp now. We just don't have time. And I don't know how we get everybody out there marching, but what's highlighted in COVID is all the systems that are not working, and we really do need to do this. And yet I too feel like it's incredibly colonial and to say we're going to figure out the transition and you're going to like it. We have to get everybody at the table. And so, yeah, I agree that trying to convince people in all communities that this urgency is sort of the same, because when climate changes and it gets down to water and food, it is the minority communities that are now, not some distant future, now having trouble. So how do we provide whatever support is needed to bring more people in and see that this is the tenant movement? It's absolutely the same thing. It's the same thing. If you can't afford housing, if you can't get good housing, it's not going to be energy efficient. You won't be able to stay there because you won't be able to afford your utilities. So how do we, I just more and more see these all as the same thing. The system has to change.
I agree. I think the best thing you all could do is continue to reach out a hand. I mean, people are only going to know what they know, and you don't want to go down the line and people say, hey, this became a problem and you're leading this and you never contacted us. I think the best thing you all could do is continue to reach a hand out. And I mean, one day when things change, they will reach back. A good example is kind of our first protest, and the protest I put on is it brought out about 10,000 people down to the plaza. And a lot of people criticize me as that I didn't consult the NAACP, Urban Lake, the many groups that are in civil rights or in socioeconomic rights in the community. But I saw the urgency. Something had to be done now. We had to have something talked about now. But then after the whole event, then we sat down and made sure that everyone was at the table when we not only had this movement grow, but it's like, all right, now we're in closed door settings. We're now talking policy. That's when I then started talking to the other groups. I think when we talk about the urgency and taking the system changing, I mean, if we see that, we're all educated and we know that, then sometimes we have to move without groups sometimes. And I know that sounds bad when I say it, but that's why I say more importantly, the day after the revolution, I think we need to be judged on how and who's at the table then. So making sure that, I mean, that's why I said the best thing now is continuing to reach a hand out. And I mean, when they reach back, I mean, educating them and making sure that they know that this is their issue. This is all of us. Because I think when if the end comes and the rising sea levels and we have droughts, it's not going to stop if you're black or brown or gay or straight. It's not going to just go around you or all of us. So I think we need to realize that.
Should we be engaging NAACP, have more of these groups come to commission meetings and just continue active dialogue with these various groups to see how we can
Yeah.
demonstrate more points of intersection.
Yeah, I think absolutely, because even it took them changing. I was going to talk to them after this, but that climate justice is something that they should have a seat at the table for. That when things change, as they should change, and they inevitably will, that they need to have a seat at the table and being well aware of this. Even with kind of the Urban League and the NAACP, they didn't really have an activist branch, but they're open-minded and now have added that because they've seen the times have changed. I think if you presented that to them and talked to them, they would then add a climate justice branch because they see that things are changing and that they need to move with the times. I think continuing to reach a hand out to them and showing them that everyone could change, everyone could do better, then if they understand that, they'll move and move with the times. If they're really about what they talk about they're doing, that's civil rights for all people of color and disenfranchised communities.
I think something else that's, and this is more for my fellow commissioners, I think something that's a responsibility for us is we can't simply expect one individual like Justice to have all the answers for us. Part of the work for us has to be doing the reading, doing the work to understand the perspectives of those who have already been sort of researching these things, bringing attention to these things. So like when Nathan brought the economic justice website to our attention, that's an example of someone who, if we're not going to do the work of trying to engage communities for whatever reason, and I am firmly not in that camp, then at the very least, our responsibility is to, as much as we can, try to understand the insights and perspectives that they have already tried to bring to our attention, but for racism has not been at the forefront. So I appreciate what Justice is doing, but we also have to recognize that as much as we can ask him, the onus is also on us to learn and to understand, so that when we're having these conversations, we're informed and we're already able to be on a much closer wavelength. So we're not having to ask all these questions of who should we be talking to, or what are the elements that we should be considering. I mean, going all the way back to the issue about reparations, I mean, how many of us have actually read The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates? I see one or two. Okay, I see you, Nathan, and Mark, and Jerry. Okay, so a few of us have, but I mean, that's just sort of one example of one of the things that we have to do if we're not going to take the time to engage with communities in our work, is then our job, our responsibility is to understand as much from that perspective as we possibly can to inform our work and sort of blunt the criticism that we will rightly receive for not including those voices as we move forward.
Well, I'm going to talk for a minute. I appreciate the conversation so far. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that we find the language to communicate the things that we care about. And I feel like we're too jargony, we're too complex, we're not communicating clearly what we are concerned about. I did think that the just transition principles that were on the website that Nathan recommended had language that could really be helpful to us. And maybe it's language that we need to modify to make it more familiar to people in our region, but we need to be able to talk about these things with some shared understanding. I told Bob this. I escaped and read a short book recently called The Story of More, and it was by a woman called Hope Jarin, but it's a very non-jargony, approachable explanation of how we got here, and it addresses, Marty, the greed, and it addresses this wanting more and more, and that more is better. And it's things like that that we need to be able to communicate in a simple way that we create shared understanding about our concerns. People are not interested in the statistics and the details, and they just want to know how we got here and what can we do next, and how do we do it fairly? And so I'm really concerned that we find language that works for us in communicating with each other.
I would say, and kind of to echo what you said, Carol, I really do. And when I was sent the invitation, I do like the wording of a just transition, that it needs to be everyone, it needs to be fair. I like the wording personally when I read that.
I'm on Facebook and I sound off there too. And it's, I'm amazed at how many people are finding conspiracy under every rock and inventing rocks to have conspiracy under. I mean, there's a kind of a fear or inability to find a center within themselves, and they go off in fantasy on stuff. Now, is that all mental illness? I think some of it may be, but maybe we all delve into mental illness from time to time, because I can believe stuff in the middle of the night that I can't believe at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know, I see heads shaking like, yeah, I get that. I know what that's like. and so we have a significant number of people. We don't have a majority, I don't think, of people who dip into that, but we have a significant number of those people who by our system we have to listen to and help, or help is that's not looking at them straight in the eye, that's looking down on them. But they don't seem to be able to reason their way out of what I find not logical, not reasonable. So, but we got to do it. We got to, these words, maybe the simple language that you're looking for, Carol. I don't know.
Marty,
Yeah.
I'm just going to speak to that for 2 seconds. So there was a really, really great piece by a group called On the Media. They do really good reporting on NPR, and they describe two different types of conspiracy theories. One is from marginalized people who have actually experienced plots against them by nationalistic forces, including medical experimentation, the flooding of different low minority and groups who are vulnerable. And those types of conspiracy theories are typically because they have been the subject of mistreatment in the past.
Yeah.
There's another type of conspiracy theory that is by privileged people because they don't want to see themselves as culpable in a system that is broken in the first place. And so one of the things that I constantly struggle with on this commission and as a Kansas Citian is, how do you exist on both sides of the state line when you have such different realities? And when you're talking about a planet in the balance, and I think that communicating to people of privilege the very real situation that we're in which it's not going to be a conspiracy that Black and brown people are going to suffer the worst of what's to come. That's not a conspiracy, that's a reality. And so I think that we have to try to straddle both of those things. I think we have to try to straddle, communicating and listening to the people on the Missouri side, and then we also have to act regionally so that this becomes something that everybody is concerned with for their own personal and communal well-being.
I like it.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And this is Why, I think, and I agree with that. I think one, a lot of people playing the conspiracies is to not see the real problem or see that they are part of the problem. But then on the other side, and why I am so passionate about education in Kansas City, and especially in communities of color and even in higher education, is that's how you keep a community and people under. You keep people oppressed when they're uneducated and they don't know what their rights are and or what's really going on. I think why a lot of communities of color and even Black and brown communities do listen to a lot of these conspiracies that are brought out is because, I mean, I'll be honest, a lack of funding for education in Black and brown areas. So, I mean, years and years of advancement and in certain groups moving forward, I mean, they're going to stay stagnant. And even with this conversation on education, I've been going through, went through high school and then about to finish at UMKC. Because of my education, I see the urgency of the climate crisis. So I understand us trying to reach out to communities of color, but if they don't see the problem and how it relates to them, then I mean that shows that education and it shows the root of the problem is that there's a problem there. So if you got what I said, I know I kind of went off, but it's like we're trying to explain this to people that do not have a lot of resources when it comes to education and how it relates to them. They're only going to be well aware of what is directly affecting their life. And that's usually what they're going to eat, where they're going to sleep, and how they're going to pay their bills. They're not looking at, it's a hierarchy of need. They're not looking at kind of out there. And I mean, that also shows if you can worry about other things like that, you do have a privilege where you don't have to worry about basic needs like that. So that's all I have to say on that. And I appreciate it.
Mhm.
All right, if there are no more questions for me, we did kind of go over everything I talked about through the questions. It was kind of current, the future, and then kind of outreach. You guys could all do, but we talked about all that. But no, I appreciate the conversation, the question, and yeah.
Justice,
Mhm.
quickly, moving forward, next steps. What's coming up?
So on my side, or what we should all do next steps?
Well, both, sure.
So kind of next steps is, and this has to stay here on this committee, but working with the city council to look at, I think, and I truly believe this, that our institutions, for example, the KCPD is funded at too much. I think that a lot of those dollars could be used to funding education, housing, and other disparities. And I truly believe that if you fund education, housing and stuff like that, the role of the police will not be so prevalent in the community. We do not talk about this in the suburbs because their education's funding, they have housing, they have good jobs, and I think that our funding should be going to there. And it's the same with just kind of how we move the city forward when it comes to environmental decisions. I think we need to make that more of an initiative than just kind of short-term gains. I think our city operates too much on short-term thinking instead of long-term thinking of how the future of the city and its people are going to operate. So that's kind of the next thing for me and kind of our side of things, but really making sure that everyone sees the urgency and the connection. That's really what I've been doubling down and talking to communities of color, kind of representatives from them, that this issue needs to be an issue of all of us and that it needs to be on the table as well. I think kind of moving forward, I don't know when your guys' next meeting is, but there is one of my good friends from UMKC also wanted to talk to the committee about kind of African American policy and actual policy that could be implemented on the municipal level here in the city. But we'll see. I think elections matter too. I mean, we need city council people and those in office that also see the urgency of this, not just, oh, let's just make a building green because it's cool. We're making it green because there's a disaster coming down the line. but yeah.
So, Justice, just real quickly here, you talk about the universality of some of these economic tribulations that we've got, and it seems like collective bargaining and the idea of revitalizing that is something that has been kind of like percolating inside the conversation, but it hasn't really gotten to the surface quite yet. Do you think that's just a little bit of a step too far in terms of integration within the labor force generally about like some of the economic reasons that there continues to be such a huge disparity?
No, I think absolutely. I think, and let me be very clear. I think everything in this moment, we don't have a lot of moments like this where we see everyone kind of gathering together and kind of watching each other and seeing what change is going to come from this. I think we need to not use this moment, but yes, use this moment and make sure that everything's on the table and that we're seeing that everyone's kind of having a collective nature to each other, that everyone agrees with it if it knows that it's going to better one of their neighbors. So I think absolutely when we talk about bargaining and then labor force is we need to make sure that that's a great equalizer as well, and that those in labor are also being well represented and that they look like the community they work for. So
sure. I know you were already kind of wrapped up there, but I couldn't let you go without asking.
yeah.
Who have we not heard from?
There was just one comment I was going to say, but and Justice, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to the group and all your efforts, during these last few months, particularly. It's a much needed conversation that's taking place that's long overdue. What I was going to say that's more pertinent to the group is, I'm the chair of the Central City Sales Tax Board. And so I have a lot of interaction with, sorry about this in the background, with some of the different neighborhood groups on the side of the Central City sales tax boundaries. I would just encourage us that they're very active, the neighborhood groups, very organized. I think the issue they've run into is there's constantly people telling them no, or a lack of priorities coming from policymakers when it comes to meeting their needs. And so I would really encourage us to reach out to them. We currently have a proposal on that has been submitted by the Santa Fe Neighborhood Association, which is an excellent proposal for housing rehab. They have about 80 homeowners that have different needs that they want to see met for their house. And it's a really modest proposal, what they're seeking. But a lot of the things that they want do overlap towards what our priorities are, and then some resources that, our group could potentially point them to. So there's homeowners that need new windows. And so weatherization is something that, overlaps with what we do. It's just a question of getting them connected with the different resources that are out there besides just the sales tax to meet those needs. But the larger point I'm trying to make is I think we need to reach out to them individually, those neighborhood groups, and I think we'll be surprised by the level of engagement we get from them and the level of input. And I would start with Santa Fe because they have like I said, a very strong proposal. We've worked with Ivanhoe and Blue Hills as well with past projects, but this is the most immediate one that's pressing.
Let me ask you this, DJ. Is this an opportunity that the EMC might be able to be an advocate for proposals that are coming forward and use that as an opportunity to illustrate the link between the neighborhood interests and the environment and justice issues?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like Justice said, for a lot of folks, I think they see things as, well, what are our most pressing needs? I'm having a hard time putting food on the table now. This is the reality of my situation. I can't think of having a more, efficient furnace. But, I think that there are some of those immediate needs that they've expressed, most importantly, are things that do overlap with us. And, the city certainly has some resources that they devote towards weatherization projects. So I think it's just a question of again, getting these groups in the room with us, pointing out the different resources that are out there, and the city staff certainly could help with that as well. So they know that, hey, look, I mean, yeah, I can go to the Central City sales tax for some of this, but there's a whole lot that we just don't know about, that we didn't know were even options. I think the city, and I mean this respectfully, because I think Andy, Jerry, I think you guys did a good job of them saying broadly as a city as a whole, traditionally struggles with its communications with its constituents about what is available. And then you look at the citizen satisfaction surveys that go out every year, and the city generally has scored pretty low marks on the communications piece. And so I think that, our engagement with them, I think, is not only, to listen to what their needs are, as we've been listening on the Central City Sales Tax Board, but also let them know, well, hey, these are the resources that, you are entitled to, that we can connect you with. That's all I got on that piece. So I would just say invite neighborhood groups, to keep it short.
I don't really know how to bring this to a close because I don't think we have a conclusion to offer. I do hope we'll continue this conversation and that we'll all make an effort to do some research and become better informed. I do want to, I know I've just hammered this home 1,000 times. I want to encourage all of you to participate in the city's comprehensive planning process. This week, they're talking about the environment, and this is a chance for us to talk about the difference between a regenerative economy and an extraction economy. And for us to say again that the environment is everything around us and we are part of it, and it is not separate. So every one of you individually can get on there and hammer those points home. And I hope you will.
I've been doing it quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, and I'm excited to see a lot of the input so far. So, but yeah, to sort of piggyback on Carol's point, it's a great opportunity to speak about not only the environment in general, but the specific environmental issues that are important to you, like the fact that transportation is the largest greenhouse gas emission sector in the country and in the city. But that's just me.
Also, if you guys want any help on any city ordinances or anything, just let me know.
Thank you so much for coming. And you are welcome to stay, and you're welcome to join us anytime you want. We meet on the second Wednesday of the month from 4 to 6 every month. So same time, same place, I guess, for now, right? Zoom it is.
Oh yeah, I'll send my contact information so the group has it. But no, I appreciate everyone being here and for all the work you guys do. And yeah, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on to Laura? The next thing on our agenda is for Laura to talk to us about the Environmental Achievement Awards.
All right. And Justice, thank you for being here. And I will also, I'm in charge of our city's climate planning process here coming up. And you reached out to me and I responded to you on behalf of the Kansas City Green Teams about the thing you put together off the plaza, which is awesome. And so we will be reaching out to you, especially to make sure we get contact with a lot of those groups that are harder to find and kind of crafting those messages that bring this home with the urgency and that we're all in this together. So I will be reaching out to you soon. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
All right. And for everyone else, Environmental Achievement Awards, I thank you, Commission, for allowing us to kind of defer this for an additional month for some people to kind of get their feet back under them going back to their jobs. We went from 3 to 7, so we have 7 nominations out there right now. We have the Environmental Achievement Awards closing on the 12th of this month, and so after that I will send it out to do we have a committee specifically, or just want me to send it to everybody and you can all decide how you want to do this? I don't know how you want to do that.
Do we have volunteers?
I thought, Carol, you volunteered last time. It was
You,
Carol, Molly, and one other
Molly.
person.
Okay. Okay. That's good. Then you send it to us.
I feel like it was, yeah, it was Carol,
we're
Molly, and
three.
somebody else. Okay.
Let's see. Let me look. I can check the minutes.
I don't have them in front of me. I should probably get those in front of me, but.
Yeah, I'll do that. Well, I'll do that. Go ahead.
So 7, and we'll get those together. And we had decided that we were postponing this for a month. We hadn't specifically talked about postponing the awards ceremony for a month, but then I think Addison Banks from Heartland Conservation Alliance is on the schedule next time to talk about the Blue River report card, which means it'd be, it just fell naturally that we would actually move the awards ceremony till September. I know originally, Carol, we talked about the possibility of having a social distance outside ceremony. I think that currently with the way our curve is going on the virus, that may not be the best idea, but I wanted to bring it forward to the commission to see if you still want to meet to look into options of, you know, having this in a park under some sort of awning, or if we just try to do it virtually at this point. You're muted, Carol.
Okay. I wonder if we should check with the city communications department and see if they can do something that would showcase the kind of presentation that Molly usually puts together about the award winners. Maybe do it on Channel 2 or something like that, so that there is some way for them to get broader recognition than just a Zoom.
Yeah, and actually Andy and I talked quite a bit about that today. We could do the Zoom meeting, then we could figure out if we could still get pictures with the city manager or the mayor for those people that are comfortable, those that are already back to work at their offices, or those that are comfortable getting photographs. And then we have the weekly report in the city that comes out, and it would be very easy to do a focus on all of the award winners on the weekly report, which goes out on YouTube and is available to everyone. And then we could, of course, put that out on social media and, of course, talk to communications about other options. But those are just two that are glaringly right out there in front of us, is that weekly report. And then we have April is our social media expert in our communications department. She's pretty fabulous about getting things out there. And then we'll, of course, feature them on the city's Earth Day Everyday page that we have up and running now. And then once we get our Green Team web pages updated, which Andy's going to talk a little bit about, we'll feature them there. And that'll be a more permanent feature every year for those award winners. So on that note, though, are you thinking, Carol, that you want to do, I mean, does the commission agree that it's probably a good idea to do this virtually at this point?
I think we have to.
I would agree. I think that's a good decision that we would have to do virtual.
So we do need to wait until September, just because we need to have time to get the awards together and get everything.
Correct. So yeah, on the 12th, I will go ahead and send those out to the people that had agreed to be on the committee last time. And if anyone else wants to get involved, great. And we'll have a talk with the Education Outreach Green Team. I was thinking would be a good group to get involved with this, to make sure we get the award winners properly awarded, so that they get to have a ceremony that they feel is on par with the ones you normally put together. And of course, Molly, you can still put together the presentation you always do. We can easily have that on a Zoom as well. And we'll move forward from there. So does anybody have any questions or concerns about the Zoom? I think what I can do is just meet with city communications and bring something to you at the next meeting. Just a little update with just kind of a suite of ideas of how we can move forward on this. What do you think?
Sounds perfect.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Molly, do you remember, I think the last time that we did the Achievement Awards, we had an Evergreen Award.
We did.
So was that just because we had someone that was nominated that year who had like a huge like lifetime
Yes.
work?
It came about because of how much he had done over such a long period of time. But that doesn't mean we can't, I don't think we have to have one every year,
Mhm.
but it's out there as a special award that we can do for a lifetime achievement. Well, not
What is
lifetime.
what does the commission think about potentially nominating someone who hasn't been nominated yet, who may deserve that prestigious honor?
Sure.
I think they're your awards. You guys can do whatever you want.
That's kind of what I was hoping you'd say.
Yeah.
Why don't, if you have a nomination, why don't you give it to Laura?
Yeah, please send me one.
Yeah, and fill out the form.
Do you need the form, Ben? I can forward you the form if you need the form. Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Laura?
I think that's all. We'll just have something for you next meeting.
Okay. Andy?
Okay, I'll give kind of a less fun overview of some things here, I guess, than the Achievement Awards. But anyhow, first off, the budget reduction exercise. I know it's on the minds of a lot of folks. Council, the mayor, city manager, everybody's going through line by line of the various recommendations that were made by the directors. So any additional questions are being directed to the directors. I know they're not taking this whole exercise lightly. If there's any concerns, they're certainly being brought up. The questions are being asked, what are the impacts with every specific recommendation that was made? So I know they're taking it pretty seriously. One of the things that I kind of discovered or just found out about was that the furloughs that have been talked about in various finance committee meetings are not part of the original recommendations that were presented to council. They were kind of being reserved as a possible way to bridge the gap between those recommendations that aren't accepted because they're just not feasible, and then possibly laying furloughs over the top of that. So this is still early in the conversation. So I've heard that they're going to try to get through this sometime through the month of July, possibly early August is probably when we'll start to see some type of some recommendations implemented through the council. So that's pretty much all I have about that. I don't really have any more specifics about any particular recommendations that were presented. Tied to that, the next thing would be, you may have seen this in an announcement about the citywide business plan retreat that the council will be having this Friday. So an announcement just went out about that today. And essentially this will be the first business plan that this particular council will be crafting for themselves. It'll be they're going to own this one. When they were elected, they were more or less kind of inheriting the previous council's business plan. So this one, who knows what priorities, what goals and objectives they're going to be identifying in this particular business plan. But and this is a 4 to 5 year business plan is kind of how they do these. And this is one way, this is one tool that was proposed years ago to kind of help, set that opportunity where, because we're kind of restricted to an annual budget cycle, the 5 year business plan kind of allowed us to kind of plan more strategically for longer periods of time. The retreat will be visible on Channel 2 and various other streaming mechanisms on Friday. Starts at 10 o'clock, goes till about 1 o'clock. The public does not have the opportunity to comment. This is purely council-driven conversations, but you can observe, you can kind of see where they're going. And then the directors are only there just to answer questions that might come about during their planning process. So I don't know that they're going to get it knocked out in a day, but they're going to get through at least the framework of the plan. So that's on Friday. So you might, if you've got the time, tune in to observe that. Moving next, the climate action planning process for Kansas City. Laura kind of brought it up briefly. What we call the request for information is out on the street. And this is pretty much where we're soliciting from various facilitators. And we kind of sent this out to a list of facilitators around the country that have experience in doing these kinds of plans. But this will basically kind of help kind of narrow down what the costs might be associated with a plan of roughly the scope we're looking for. With that, what we do is we take that number to council and we work with them to hopefully get the funding appropriated. So at that point, once you get the appropriations, that allows us to issue a request for proposals, which is really be the official request, more or less, for the full detailed costs associated with the plan. The RFI is due, Laura, help me out here. I've already lost again. Was it the 14th, 13th or 14th of this month?
The RFI closes on the 13th of this month. I don't know how long it's going to take procurement to get together all of the bids after that. I'm assuming a couple of days.
Yeah. Nowadays with the platform that they have, they're pretty quick about turning this around. So we'll at least get some numbers pretty quickly about middle of the month, and then from there we'll get with council and hopefully get an ordinance together to get some funding for this. So anyhow, and Laura is already crafting the draft of the RFP, and Jerry and myself will be adding to that where we need to. So we'll be hopefully ready to go as soon as we get the funding in place to get the RFP out on the street. So hopefully by mid-August, mid to late August, we'll get that out. I know Laura's working also on the engagement aspect already. So we're actively looking for folks that we can engage with as part of the climate planning process. So I know she's been doing some work, I've been doing some work, Jerry's been kind of working behind the scenes. So we're all kind of working on kind of trying to start building those networks and those relationships so that once we get the facilitator on board, we're already moving in that direction. So that's just kind of work that's going on behind the scenes at this point. And then Carol kind of took away a little bit of thunder on the poll of the week. So again, just a shameless plug for the comp plan. The poll of the week, which closes on the 12th, is regarding the environment. So certainly get in there. There are some specific questions. What do you think the most significant environmental issue is currently in Kansas City? What changes can we make to the culture? So anyhow, there's your opportunity to get some feedback in there. You do need to register. So if you haven't done that yet, go to playbook.kcmo.gov and you do have to register. And then from there, you can kind of sign up for updates and be able to get your input into that system. So, and of course, we'll be tied into that for our climate planning process. So whatever feedback goes in through that door will get funneled to us from that angle as well. So are there any questions regarding the climate action plan or what I've spoken to so far?
Andy, yeah, I just want to be sure I understood. So you're saying that you've got an RFI out now and people are responding to that, and that will give you kind of a order of magnitude of the kind of funds you need, and you take that to the council to get the funding.
That's correct.
Right?
Yep.
And then you go out with an RFP and you select people within that ceiling that has been established by the council.
Yeah, our procurement division, they cannot put out an RFP without having funds appropriated to the project. And so we obviously know that the $25,000 that was given to me in our budget is not going to cover it. So we have to kind of get that number a little closer to where we think it might be, and we have to get council to approve that funding before procurement can put that RFP out on the street. So the RFI was the tool that procurement allowed us to. We put together, it was a fairly simple scope, and in terms of what the main RFP scope will be, but it's enough that we think those that will be interested in the project can at least put some number down on paper that we can work with.
Okay.
Yep.
And how much time, so what's the calendar time involved in going through that till we have a consultant on board?
Yeah, so this is, again, the 14th or so. Procurement takes a couple of days probably to process that through their online platform. We'll get that number. This isn't like a selection process, a selection committee. We're just grabbing the number. It's a matter of working with Councilwoman Shields and the Finance Committee to basically put together the ordinance, and that usually takes 2 to 3 weeks. So, I'm looking at probably middle of August, reasonably, to get that ordinance in place. And by that time, I'm hoping that our office will have the RFP ready to go by that point with our internal draft review and everything we want in it. And it'll hit the street hopefully mid-August to late August. Now, once they put it out, I think our procurement officer, Laura, you can refresh my memory, but did she say it has to be out on the street for 3 weeks?
A minimum of 3 weeks. And just to clarify, once we get the RFIs back with a number and we talk about it, we're going to start the RFP process, and we're going to try to get that into procurement as soon as possible. So procurement will have it and can start putting it into their specific city format at the same time everything's going to council. We're trying to compress timelines as much as humanly possible here, but then yeah, to give people time to give a good proposal, we're looking at 3 weeks minimum, and it'd be smarter to put it out for a whole month. 30 days is usually a good time to have one of these out on the streets. And then during that time, we'll be putting together the internal team that's going to review those RFPs, or when the actual bids, when they come back. And that will be an internal and some external folks as well. We're going to have some talks about how that's going to work, because we don't want a whole lot more than 5 people, but we want to make sure it's 5 people that can give really good input on each of these plans and get a consultant on board that works for Kansas City. Did I answer your question, and probably way more than you asked?
No, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Lara and Andy, where does the actual request live?
The actual RFQ or request for proposals, or?
Yes.
It will.
Yeah, go on.
It'll live on City Contract Central. The thing with RFIs, it's a little different than RFQs or RFPs, is RFIs go out to a specific group of people depending on how much we're thinking they're going to be. So what happened is through working with the Sustainability Directors Network, I had a list of people that had completed climate action plans for other cities that had come well recommended. I gave that list to our procurement folks, but otherwise, because it's under $200,000, I guess, it's considered a small local business solicitation. So those national firms that I specifically listed, and that went through Andy and Jerry as well to kind of review that. It went to them, and then it went to any small local businesses that could also do that work here locally. Sure. And then that one, from what I can tell from procurement, does not live anywhere. It just goes to those specific folks. The RFPQ will live on Contract Central, our city contract site. So you'll be able to go online and actually see the request for proposals and let businesses know that it's out there. And then it will also be in Bonfire, which is the city's procurement system. And Bonfire, it's automatically set up to send out to a whole slew of possible vendors based on search criteria they put in there, environmental, engineering, sustainability, whatever. It'll go out automatically to all of those folks. So okay. Once we have the RFPQ out, I can give you all the links so you can go see what was put together, and anything that's missing in that document that we should have had. Of course, we have to keep it internal, just so there's not anybody given a specific advantage before it's awarded. But after that, when we're working on the scope with the consultant, once you've seen the RFP, we could get your input on making sure certain things are in the scope.
Well, so specifically to just the conversation that we've been having about representation. So what I would be curious about is, within the stipulations that we're putting out there to different consultants, the level of interaction and requirements for listening and integration of solutions or any proposals for solutions that they come up with, like that's going to have to be something that comes in from us as a requirement of them, and that can kind of decide what they put together in the first place.
Correct. To a degree. And so when we put out the RFI and when we put out the RFPQ, resolution 20005 goes out with it that talks about this has to be an equity focused plan. These are all the groups we want to have involved with it. So that's going to go out with it. So they already see that document. And the plan, when we put it together, it's going to have all that wording, as well as this plan has to come from an equity focus. We already decided that we're doing a climate action adaptation mitigation and sequestration plan based on what your all's input. That's all going out, and that it's the focus of the plan is equity, and everything else revolves around that. So that for sure is going out. How then sort of making sure this works correctly is figuring out who we have at the table that has the, as far as reviewing these RFPQs when they come in, who we have at the table that has a good equity lens. And at this point, I don't have that person in mind. And so if somebody has somebody that they know has expertise in that field that can make sure that the right buzzwords are coming out of this plan, it would be great. And we could put an equity consultant is somebody I definitely wanted to have at the table on the review committee. So be thinking about that. And also on that note, Andy said we've started outreach, sort of kind of the big players, and Jerry's working on outreach for the plan from the perspective of who was on it before. Are they still in those roles? Can they offer some, historic knowledge? He's looking into that. But folks that we may not have thought of, contacts you have, people that are super interested, just start throwing them my way. If it's the NAACP, we've already got somebody, but it's great to have another person to reach out to if our initial contact doesn't work. And I say that knowing we actually do not have a contact at the NAACP just yet. Andy and I were just talking about that one. But so please, any contacts that you have, any groups you have, and you don't have to do a lot of legwork, give me a name and an email address, and we'll do the rest of the legwork, and we'll follow up and have those conversations on the phone about why this could be useful if you don't have time.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Last thing I just throw out there is about the Casey Green website. And as you know, these are volunteers of city employees that kind of work on the various teams. And the same thing sort of applies to the website, that they're sort of updated as the team members have time to kind of work on those. So one of the things we've kind of talked about in-house is, of course, we need to get those updated. I know that the commission has looked at those pages back several months ago. And I think we want to be mindful of some of the suggestions or recommendations that came out of that. So Laura, being the coordinator of our 4 Green teams, has already asked for our team leads to start looking at their specific teams, their pages, to kind of see what projects, programs, things that could be updated, and start kind of working on that content. But I think that we'd be welcome to kind of revisit some of those comments from the commission to kind of make sure we add to the Casey Green website those things that are relevant. Kind of same thing we'll be doing for the OEQ web pages, which is where the commission's page resides, as well as the Climate Protection Steering Committee. So some of that content is starting to get a little bit dated, so we're going to start trying to update that as well. So just want to let you know that was kind of also going on in the background. All right. So I think that was about all I had. It's really worth bringing to the commission's attention at this time. So unless there's any other questions.
Okay. Do we have anybody who has a committee report from the monitoring of a council committee? No. On the liaison reports, the Air Quality Forum isn't going to meet until later in the month, but they're doing something interesting. For the first time under the new transportation plan, they're requiring the applicants for different projects to send a pre-application that then the people who are on the different marked boards have a chance to look at and review in light of the priorities of the different committees. And I haven't tackled the list yet. Have you, Andy?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Fortunately, I didn't figure it out until a little bit later. And you got to look for the training on this a little bit. But fortunately, what they did is they took the vast volume of those projects and have kind of narrowed them down to be more specific to, in our case, the Air Quality Forum, as well as the other committees. So the list of projects isn't nearly as daunting as it was when I first looked at it, because I thought it's going to take me days to get through these projects. And then end of the day, it's a much more manageable list of projects that we'll have to review. Now, we'll have the option to look at all the others if you've got the time and the inclination. But at least from the perspective of just what the Air Quality Forum has say on, it's much more manageable. And they're regional projects, so you do get a chance to see all the proposals from all around the region. It's really pretty impressive.
Now, the thing that they're trying to do that's different is it used to be the proposals would come in and they would be complete. And it would be take it or leave it, very little negotiation. And this approach with the pre-application gives us a chance to raise other priorities with the applicants before they put their final proposal together. And so it's a chance to incorporate stormwater considerations or noise barriers, or Andy, you can think of things, but it's a chance to raise other topics with the applicants before they submit their final proposal. Do we have any other reports? Bob, do you have something from the Climate Protection Steering Committee?
No, I think Joanne and the committee are really waiting at this point for Andy to let us know how we can support things that EMC is doing and that the office is doing.
Okay. Anybody else?
So I actually did some reviewing of different committees, and I believe I'm on the finance, safety, and the business sessions. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any video of them, but I did read the minutes, and I didn't really see a lot that was relevant to our work here in the EMC. I did note that they're decriminalizing marijuana, which is nice. But I think that the only thing that I thought was tangentially relevant was that the city is or about to engage in a lawsuit based off of the Hancock Amendment. And so there was a request for funds to get professional testimony or expert testimony to defend water charges for a potential infraction of the Hancock Amendment. And so I wasn't sure if I had to actually Google the Hancock Amendment to figure out what exactly it was talking about, but how many people in the commission are familiar with that one? Anybody who's been on the commission a long time knows, because we spent years trying to overcome that hurdle to get recycling, right?
Yeah.
Thorn in our sides, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was relevant because it's like, I don't know, can we take it to the Supreme Court or like, yeah, I feel like it's relevant for local control and just a lot of the preemption issues that we've been trying to deal with.
It's real. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. Anybody else? Okay, on all the business, let me ask again, everybody submitted their conflict of interest form?
Yes.
Yes, right.
Yes.
No.
You
I
need to
cannot
do
tell a
that.
lie.
You need to do that.
Okay.
So any new business that anyone would like to raise with the commission? Well, this is our chance to hear from our visitors. Any of you that have called in or signed in that would like to contribute something for the good of the cause?
Good afternoon, Ms. Adams. This is Billy Davis. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so everybody, this is Billy Davies, Sierra Club Missouri chapter. Good to hear y'all's voices again. Just wanted to, because I think, I know this is discussed a lot and celebrated at the last EMC meeting, but I think that was before some additional good news regarding the building codes. I just wanted to express thanks to you all again for speaking up. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware and have seen, the council, I think a week after your last meeting, passed a resolution expressly committing to evaluating the 2021 IECC this fall. And it sounds like thanks to the work of folks at OEQ and working collaboratively with Planning and Development Department, there might even be some opportunity for further public comment or public meetings. And so just I want to thank you all, and we're grateful to be able to have this time to bring even more people in to this this process, so that part of this goal, and as far as lifting up the voices of community members and prioritizing equity, centering this process in affecting change for the better in people's lives. It's great that during this time of great struggle in our country, folks are able to focus on taking care of their friends and neighbors, and so we can come back later this fall more refreshed with more time to evaluate this policy and provide meaningful comments. And so just want to thank you all again for all of your work and all who had a hand in getting your letter sent to the council. It made a world of difference, and it's gotten some great coverage. KC showing leadership. So anyway, that's all.
Well, let me respond to that a little bit. The commission has two more chances really to weigh in on that. One is when they start the process, when they figure out how they're going to set it up in the fall, it's another chance for us to send a letter saying that we want to be sure the environmental stakeholders are included. So that's a letter we can send another time to weigh in. And then we'll have a chance to weigh in a final time when the actual question comes to the council, and we would be able to weigh in on what we would like to see passed. So we don't need to be done with this. We can stay on top of it.
You're here.
And thanks for your leadership and tenacity on this issue.
Hey, we're all in this together, team effort.
Yeah, thanks, Billy, for bringing that up. I couldn't recall if that had happened right at the last commission meeting or whether it was after, but and then it slipped my mind when I was putting this together. But I appreciate what you guys did as well. I think it is a team effort. So between us and the external stakeholders, it really does make a difference.
Okay, does anybody else want to weigh in or say hello or give us some new direction?
Is anyone concerned about the potential for serious economic downturn if there isn't another rollout for rents and impacts?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't even know, Carol, right now. So I got $40,000 from the Kansas City Relief Fund. I'm losing about $20,000 a month in rent. So it doesn't, the 40,000 is, I'm very thankful for, but losing 20 a month does not cover very many months. It covers 2 months. So my concern is, I'm thinking, do I want to try to stretch that 40 and do some relief for 3 months? Do I want to try to make the 40 stretch for 6 months? if I was a betting person, I'm saying, I don't think things get back to normal much before January, if that. And the problem is, I have people that haven't worked, tenants that haven't worked for 2 months. So they haven't paid rent for 2 months. They will never recoup that money they lost for 2 months. And maybe they're going on their 3rd month or 4th month. And depending on what their situation is, people that thought they were going to get their jobs back maybe went back for 2 days and found out they were laid off. So every month I have more people. So yeah, it started like in April, I was getting 95% of the rent. In May, it dropped to 75. In June, it dropped to 65% of the rent. And I expect, I'll know in the next couple of days what July looks like, but I would expect July to be less than June. So something less than 65% of the rent. And the need for food is great. And the need for protective cleaning products as well as coverage, gloves and masks. So I'm spending more on cleaning and masks and gloves than I ever have before, because we didn't have to do that. And I'm spending for cleaning services that I've never had to do. And I have less rent coming in. So yeah, it's not a good mechanics, right? Less money in the bank, more expenses.
It just seems like this is something, it's not hidden, but it almost seems hidden. People are sort of maybe comfortable with quarantining now, but I just think there's a tsunami coming.
It feels
Potentially.
like that. It feels like that. I'm fortunate in my organization because my construction side of the house is doing very, very well. It's really kicking butt. And we've done more quantity, and our results have been good as an organization. Bottom line, it looks like people are very productive at home because our results are very strong. But I don't know what happens to these families, and beyond the forgiveness money I have today, you know, I'm applying every day for more and more rent relief because that helps me, you know, basically I pay their rent for them. And so people don't have the headache of I'm behind 3 months in rent. And I don't know that the answer is evict them, whether it's moratorium or not. That really doesn't, I mean, that just puts people out on the street that aren't on the street right now. Although the mechanism for me really is I don't have to have renters. I need to have paying renters in my properties because that's how I pay payroll. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. Right now, I'm not doing anything and I don't intend to kick people out on August 1, but I don't know how long we can go with declining numbers.
Now, are you getting help from the KC Relief Fund that was raised here, the COVID
Yes.
Relief Fund?
Yeah, so I've gotten some help from NeighborWorks. I've gotten some help from the Relief Fund. We're getting ready for our annual event, and we're going to target that towards rent relief. And again, I'm getting fee for service on all of my construction stuff, and it's very strong. So typically, my construction carries about 30% of the revenue, and it's carrying more like 50% of the revenue. And I'm lucky. I have that much going on and that much that I can service. So again, the organization is fine, but the whole idea of my property. So I called my bank to find out what could happen on forgiveness forbearance with my loan. So some banks will say, you don't have to pay for 6 months and we'll add 6 months to the back of your mortgage, which is a good thing because, you know, whether my mortgage ends on December 31st or goes 6 more months, I can deal with that, right? But my bank isn't that. US Bank is, you don't have to pay for 6, but in 9 months you have to be whole. So basically I'm just delaying the inevitable, which is I have to be whole by 9 months. So if I don't pay for 6, then in 3 months I have to pay 9 months worth of mortgage. So it's not really a gift. It's just it's delaying the inevitable. So we're just continuing to pay every month. Yeah, and trying to figure out how to do everything else that we need to do. So yeah, it's just and I'm a small organization. I only have 263 properties. I can't imagine it across the country because I know other organizations that have, you know, thousands, 24,000 units. 18,000 units. When you have that, and you have a population that is, you know, it's basically, you know, 85% of my population is people of color. And it's those people that are, that population that is affected by this crisis, so, or this pandemic. So yeah, so I don't know. And I think other cities are like ours. They don't know when they're going back. I mean, California reopened and now it reclosed, you know, it's closed again. So San Francisco specifically is super duper. I mean, they're completely closed and nobody is allowed anywhere without a mask. So it's just, the hard thing for me is how do I plan? Because I don't know where the end is. I don't even think Kansas City has reached its peak. So we have not even seen the worst of Kansas City's, what we're gonna see. And we're not on the downturn. We're on the uptick, right?
Thank you, Gloria.
You're welcome.
Please keep us up to date.
Yeah, sorry to be a
A
downer.
thermometer for what's going to be happening.
Yeah.
Gloria, are you telling your story somewhere, or at least
Yes.
journaling your story?
So, yeah, so NeighborWorks is doing monthly meetings, which is the organization I belong to. I'm an exemplary organization inside of NeighborWorks. I'm a smaller organization, so I don't have as much. And each one has a different makeup. Mine happens to be a third of my business is property management, a third of it's construction, and a third of it I raise. So we're doing fine on the raising. And like I said, our construction's probably carrying 50% of the house right now. So the fact that my properties, but I'm still looking at the families and saying, like, I got a grant and I've got $10,000 for food, but I've already given out 8,000. So
Right.
do we have to make that the rest of the 10 last for 4 more months? And how do I do that? And then I got a grant for, like I said, rent forgiveness, but I'm losing so much more than we're predicted to lose about $100,000 in rent. Right now, we're predicting it based on what we've seen so far. We're predicting by the end of the year, we'll lose about $100,000 in rent. Well, I've got $40,000 of rent relief. So those don't match, right? I'm losing 100, I'm bringing in 40, so I'm still short. But the families themselves is what I'm thinking is how do they get whole? Because I can fix the piece called maybe rent or some part of rent, but how's the rest of their world get whole? And right now they're, like I said, they're in heavy need of food.
And you can't have these people evicted. You cannot evict people during a pandemic.
Yeah, I just don't see how you do it at all.
The shelter.
Moratorium or not, I don't see how you begin to evict people no matter what. But I also say, it's just, yeah, it feels like a sinking ship and I don't really know all I can do. But NeighborWorks is trying to come up with more money. The City Relief Fund, the Kansas City Community Foundation Fund is trying to come up with more. Matter of fact, what they did is they brought the housing organizations together and said, we have $6 million left. How is the best way for us to spend it? And basically people are saying rent relief. You need to spend.
I would like Jeff Bezos to take all the billions that he has made during the pandemic, because we're all ordering from home, and pay that rent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's just super important to make sure we're capturing those numbers, because like Justice said, we're in the moment, and we have to have those stories, because people are going to forget, and we need to be able to put those stories in front of City Council. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure you're capturing that.
Our annual event is all about those numbers. I've shared, I calculated the numbers and we're sharing them on every story that we have. And so we're real clear as a staff, how the decline has happened and how much decline. And like I said, we're right now predicting that it's going to be $100,000 by December that we lose. So we're real clear on that number. If the numbers decline faster, we'll lose more. If the numbers don't decline as fast as we anticipated, we'll be able to quantify that. So we are trying to quantify that. In case there's a grant out there that says, how much have you lost year to date? I can say XYZ. That's what I've lost. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do. And we're applying. Matter of fact, while we were on here, I just got a message from the city that we got $50,000 more for minor home repair, which just is, so the construction house, like I said, continues to do well. But yeah, and every week, last week I got a grant for $10,000. So there's dribbles coming in, but I just know where we're headed is $100,000 lost by December.
Hey, Gloria.
Yes.
I can't give you $10,000, but I can give you a little grant. Where do we donate in order to help?
Oh, go on our website and you can, there should be a box that you can click. And if you can't, just put a check in the mail, because actually I would prefer a check because PayPal will take their percentage off. So yeah, look up West Side Housing, 919 West 24th Street. Yes. Yeah. And put a check in the mail. That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Gloria, I'm wondering if Enterprise or AFI or some of the big players have taken on US Bank and other big banks about this issue.
That
And
is something we
is there a
talked about.
pathway there?
Yeah. So Emmett happens to have many of his properties held up in US Bank, as well as I. So we did talk with Mark about what if, and the foundations, because we had the Kansas City Greater Community Foundation, as well as Block was there, and so was Hallmark Family Foundation. And so we said, what if we as a group said any of the funding that they're putting together for the relief program won't go to banks who don't do forbearance that is helpful for organizations like ours. So that's one thing we are looking at, is like Emmett and I coming together, because I mean, right now my piece is $1 million, but it's $1 million in a whole of, you know, 5th largest bank in the world or in the country. It's nothing, but maybe collectively Emmett and I can do something. And they did have they did have to put together a forbearance committee, and it's just unfortunate that that they said no, this is our forbearance. And they weren't anxious. They weren't talking about how they might change that.
Did US Bank get a bailout?
You know, I wouldn't know that. I don't know that offhand. I don't know that they did. I don't know that they didn't.
You know, it seems like we should use something like eminent domain and take the wealth back from those people who have been living off of people working for minimum wage, and just nationalize the companies, or I don't care what words you use, but you know, this is a biological thing that has happened, and it has nothing to do with an economy. Economies are supposed to be made to serve the people. This is obviously not serving the people anymore. And even if it's suspended, why don't they just suspend the damned economy? But see, I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know all these, well, if you do that, then you do this, and you do that. And I know how things are connected because I do know a little bit about the environment. So I know it's all connected. So why don't we get all these people in a room and just solve this thing? You know, it's like, how long is this thing going to last if we all wear our masks and don't go crazy? You know,
well, what's so simple, Marty, is that other banks do that, put it at the end. It doesn't matter if you put 6 months at the end, 10 months at the end, whatever. So my mortgage doesn't end in 2025, so it ends in 2026. Who cares? I mean, I'll just make payments then, right? I have the money. So that makes so much sense. The bank didn't lose anything by people doing that. It's more, it flexes with the times that way. But yeah, so the fact that some banks do it that way and this bank doesn't do it that way is, that's what's difficult. So like I said, we're going to try to put our heads together. I mean, personally, Westside has been trying to get out of this, the US Bank relationship anyway, and move it to our First Citizens Bank account. So we're heavily personally working on that route, which we know we have control of, which is to say, pay it off and take our business to another bank. And that way we can get out of that. So that's plan B or plan A, if you want to say. And then plan B is working with everybody else and trying to figure out policy change.
Thank you so much.
Oh, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So let me mention something here before we close, and that is we've all been missing the Native Community Town Hall, which is going on now. It's a Facebook Live program. And I know one of the key speakers is Nick Tilson, who's the Ogallala Lakota leader that was arrested because he pointed out at the National Monument how offensive Trump's appearance was there and in Tulsa, and he was arrested. So he just was released, but there's a town hall going on now, which I think you could see after the fact. I intend to try, but he's a brilliant young leader doing a great job. He created Thunder Valley and other significant programs. And it'd probably be another really important perspective on equity and just transition.
Bob, if we're not on Facebook, is there any way to?
I have a feeling you could, I have a feeling you could just find it by Googling it. It's called Native Community Town Hall. Nick Tilson is one of the leaders speaking.
Okay, thanks.
Amy Goodman might have something on in the morning.
Yeah, probably. Right.
Democracy Now!
Yeah. So they're probably celebrating the pipeline collapse and trying to reframe relative to these national monuments and these national policies as they relate to Native communities and all of us.
Okay, well, are we ready to say goodbye?
I think it's that time.
Now it's time to say.
I'm ready for a distance group hug myself.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Rachel, good luck with the minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I'm also ready to not be in front of a screen for just a little while.
Yeah, now you're talking.
For sure.
Well, everybody have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Great seeing everybody.
Oh, very good to
Take
see
care, all.
everybody.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.